Shalom everybody. In today's video we're going to be starting a new course on the history of the Kabbalah. We're going to start studying one of the works of Rabbi Aryeh Kaplan, the book Inner Space. This is a wonderful book as an introductory material to the learning of the mystical world within Judaism. So in today's class I will be discussing what the Rabbi writes regarding the oral transmission of the Kabbalah from antiquity until modern times, the history of the Kabbalah, the main figures, the main books, historical periods. B'ezrat Hashem, I would like to discuss this material. One of the reasons that I want to do this course is also because some of my friends here at the yeshiva, they asked me, the place that I study here in Israel, in Jerusalem, they asked me to learn with them something about Kabbalah, and we started learning this book, Inner Space, by Rabbi Aryeh Kaplan. So I decided to start recording the lectures and to make it public, because I know that many other people will benefit from it. There are many people out there who would like to get to know more about the wisdom of the Kabbalah, and they don't have either a master, or they don't know from where to learn. And even if they have the books, they don't understand, because Kabbalah is not something that you can learn by yourself. By the name itself, Kabbalah is telling you there is something that you have to receive by someone. And on top of receiving it, the person who gives it to you is someone that received it also from someone else. So it's a chain of transmission of knowledge back to the original source. We're going to get into all of these details, God willing, as we initiate the study of this book. But basically, this is the main idea that I want to convey in this class. B'ezrat Hashem, Siyata Dishmaya. So, chapter 1, Rabbi Aryeh Kaplan, as you know, was an American rabbi. He wrote many seforim on Kabbalah, Hasidut. He did a translation in English of the Torah. He also was behind the publication of the great masterpiece Me'am Loez, jewel, a gem of Sephardic spirituality, and many other books. And later on, his lectures, his teachings were put together in different books, different seforim, and one of them is Inner Space. So, B'ezrat Hashem, I would like to start this first class, this introduction, just reading the text, and I will be explaining a little bit. So he says, chapter 1, Kabbalah and Prophecy. What does the word Kabbalah mean? He says it comes from the root kabal, meaning to receive, or lekabel, to receive. The term implies that it is a certain kind of wisdom that is received. The Mishnah says that Moshe Rabbeinu, kibel Torah, meaning he received the Torah on Sinai and subsequently transmitted it to Yehoshua. Yehoshua transmitted it to the elders transmitted it to the prophets, and the prophets transmitted it to the men of the great assembly, and Sheikh HaKnesset Agedolah. Moses was the master of all the prophets, says the rabbi. He understood the Torah, says Rabbi Aryeh Kaplan. He understood the Torah completely. In this sense, his prophetic vision was on the level of an open vessel that could always receive more. Perhaps the secret of Moshe receiving was the more he transmitted, the more he was able to receive. The Mishnah thus says, Moshe kibel Torah, because he was the paradigm of complete and total Kabbalah, meaning receptivity to the prophetic existence. So we are seeing right now that we have an established tradition. Kabbalah is not something that just it's not an invention. Kabbalah is a transmission of the tradition, all the teachings, all the deep wisdom that is in the Torah, that is in the book that the Jewish people received from the divine, from HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Kabbalah is the fourth level of understanding of the Torah. You have 4 levels. You have what we call Pardes, we call Peshat. We have Pardes Remes. You have Derash, and you have Sod, which is the 4th level, and that's what we call the Kabbalah. Each level is the simple, the allusion, the hint, and the secret. These are the 4 levels of learning or understanding the Torah. So we see right here that it's a chain of transmission of knowledge from Sinai to under our very days. From Moshe Rabbeinu to Yehoshua, Yehoshua to the elders to the Anshei Knesset Gedolah. You have also the prophets in between. You have a chain of transmission. In fact, we have sources that will tell us name by name. In different periods of time, it will tell us. Rabbi Moshe Maimonides, he does like a whole list of the chain of transmission of the wisdom of the Torah, and by itself it's telling us that the Kabbalah came through it, because Kabbalah, like I said, is a deeper way to look at the Torah. It's one of the deepest level of understanding of the Torah. Now, from this we understand that the wisdom of the Kabbalah comes from the divine, comes from the Almighty, because Moshe kibel Torah. Moshe received the Torah from HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And we are establishing that the Kabbalah is Torah. So it says that in the level of reception, there was no one like Moshe Rabbeinu. This is what Rambam Maimonides explains. There is no prophet like Moshe Rabbeinu. At the level of Moshe Rabbeinu, he is the highest of all the prophets. Adam of Kol HaNevi'im. It's one of the 13 principles of faith of the Jewish religion. So we understand that like Moshe Rabbeinu, there's no one that was able to receive Kabbalah, that he received the Torah. Not only he received, he also gave it. And the more he gave it, the more he received. From this we understand something. The Kabbalah is something that you receive not in order to keep for yourself, but to give it to others, to transmit this knowledge to the next generation that will continue this knowledge and so on and so forth through all the generations of the Jewish nation. And we know that the Jewish nation is or to the nation, it's a light to the nations. So we understand that the light has to also spread to all the world. This is a very deep concept, deep idea. Moshe Rabbeinu didn't receive to keep. He received to give. And so on and so forth until our very days that we have received this wisdom. And the more a person receives, the more a person receives, the more he must give. And the more you give, the more you receive. This is how it works. If you receive and you keep, it seems it's not really probable that we will receive at the same level as someone who receives and gives, than someone who only receives and keeps for himself. This is not the way. So it says, the idea of Kabbalah then is to become completely infused with the Torah and to connect with it on every possible level. You want to connect with the book of God, with the Torah at the deepest level. And that's the Kabbalah, in many levels. Kabbalah is the deepest of all. So it says, without Kabbalah, a person would understand Torah on a number of levels. The only way to grasp every single nuance of Torah, however, is through the prophetic wisdom that is contained in the Kabbalah. This is something very important that I want to emphasize as well. Because we explained, Kabbalah comes from the root Kabal or lekavel, to receive. But to receive what? The tradition. What tradition? The prophetic tradition. Starting from the Moshe Rabbeinu, the greatest of all the prophets, and so on and so forth, through the different prophets in different generations until our very days. So the essence of Kabbalah is to connect with the Kadosh Baruch Hu in the deepest level of wisdom. And that deepest level is called prophecy. That's why it says that the Jewish nation is a nation of prophets. And one of the signs that it says, the Chamim explained, that in the later days, by the time of the coming of Mashiach, will be a time in which prophecy will come back to the Jewish nation. And all the nation, maybe we have many prophets like in the old days, maybe even more. As we know that Sinai, all of the 600,000 souls that stood there to receive the Torah, they all became prophets. So this is what it means to connect with Hashem at the deepest level. That's what Kabbalah is helping us. Now we can understand what Moshe transmitted to Yehoshua, and Yehoshua transmitted it to the elders, etc. According to the Torah, God told Moshe to place his spirit upon Yehoshua. That's written in the book of the Barim, Numbers 27:20. I'm reading exactly like the translator wrote it here in the book. Sometimes there are English names and using more Hebrew terms. But anyways, this is what he says here. In other words, because Moses, I say Moshe, but it's written Moses. So I guess for a wider audience to understand. So he says, Moshe was to invest Yehoshua with his own spirit of prophecy. According to an ancient midrash, this included the necessary methods and disciplines for acquiring prophecy. Moshe thus transmitted the keys for entering the prophetic state of Yehoshua, and these keys constituted the Kabbalah tradition. So the Kabbalah has the purpose, And the purpose is to get a person to the highest level of spiritual dimension or spiritual level, which is the level of nevuah, the level of prophecy. So if someone asks you, why are you learning Kabbalah? What is the Kabbalah? What is the use of Kabbalah? What is the Kabbalah doing for me? Kabbalah will connect you to the tradition of the prophets. Kabbalah has the ultimate goal to make a person a prophet. That's what it is. That's what it says. And the Kabbalah holds the keys to get that deep connection with the Kadosh Baruch Hu, because a prophet is someone who has a deep connection, like more than anyone else. That's why he's able to prophesy. Through his mouth comes the word of Hashem. The word and the will of the Almighty will be communicated to a prophet. So the Kabbalah holds the keys of that wisdom. Again, Kabbalah, understanding that is the deepest level of understanding of the Torah. So a person who learns Torah in all its levels, specifically the level of the Kabbalah, it will be someone who attain a level close to prophecy. Even though today we don't have prophets, but we have Ruach HaKodesh, we have different levels. So he says, throughout the period of the prophets, the Kabbalah was guarded by the master prophets and transmitted to select disciples. During this time, the sanctuary and later the first temple served as the focal point of all prophetic experience. When the temple was about to be destroyed, the prophet Ezekiel was shown a vision which was to signal the end of a 1,000-year period of prophecy. The wisdom is known as Ma'aseh Merkabah, the discipline or the workings of the chariot. While referring specifically to the opening chapter of the book of Ezekiel, the term Ma'aseh Merkabah is also a general appellation to the entire Kabbalah tradition. So we know that the Kabbalah, there are two major areas of learning. You have Ma'aseh Bereshit and Ma'aseh Merkabah. The workings of the creation, Bereshit, like the first book of the Torah, Genesis, Bereshit, and the Ma'aseh Merkabah. So these are, and from within you have many areas, but these are the two main, let's say, subjects of study of the Kabbalah, which basically is to understand how God created the universe, how everything functions, human beings, the creation, the universe, the planets, the galaxies, everything. All of the wisdom is contained in the Ma'aseh Bereshit and the Ma'aseh Merkabah. He says, unlike previous prophetic messages, Ezekiel's vision included an actual detailed description of the ascent of the prophet and the barriers he encountered before hearing God's voice. Coming at the close of the prophetic era, Ezekiel's vision had to contain explicit directions for attaining and entering the prophetic state. So not only Moshe Rabbeinu, he put his spirit, a portion of his spirit, on Yehoshua, and he passed it also to the elders, into the members of the Great Assembly, from prophet to prophet until different generations. Not only that, but he also passed the keys on how to attain that level and higher levels, because not all the prophets had the same level. We know that Moshe Rabbeinu achieved the highest of all the levels, but there are different levels and there were different types of levels of prophecy that were given to different prophets. It's not the same as the prophet Obadiah and the prophet Yeshayahu. You see the difference in the book and the difference of the content of the prophecy, for example, etc. That's why there's something that is, there are certain divisions. People call them lower prophets, higher prophets, but these are some kind of form of categories that we have assigned, so we understand that there are different levels of connection, different levels of prophecy, different levels of understanding, etc. Nevertheless, these directions that were passed down were couched in extremely obscure terms. For all intents and purposes, the Kabbalah tradition was to remain even more concealed than it had been until now. That means that in the old days, not everybody knew about this wisdom. It's like today, not everybody know about it. Even though today you have more and more people who are interested in learning the wisdom of the Kabbalah, and the Hachamim explained that in this generation, it is a mitzvah to reveal the secrets of the Kabbalah and to learn the Kabbalah. It's a mitzvah in today's days. But in the old days, it was not like that. It was a small group. You might not even know who they were. They studied this in secret. There are many requirements, etc. And you conceal it, you are protecting it. By the time of the building of the second temple, the keys to the Kabbalah tradition had been entrusted to the last prophets of the Jewish people, as well as to its greatest sages. Together they constituted the 120 men of the Great Assembly, Anshei HaKnesset HaGedolah. It was this body of sages that formulated the Mishnah, instructed Hagigah, stating the following: the Ma'aseh Merkabah may be taught only to individual students, one at a time, and they must be wise, understanding with their own knowledge. They thus ensure the continued transmission of the Kabbalah tradition by restricting its practices to the smallest possible circle of masters. Meaning, an elite of people were the ones who really understood wisdom. Because you have to be wise, you have to be learned, there are many requirements to get this wisdom in the old days. You have to reach higher levels, the highest levels, to be able to receive this wisdom. So you protect it. So he says, outside of this circle, these practices would remain almost totally unknown. Almost. Some people knew certain things. Most of the secrets were concealed within the circle of masters. This policy continued until after the destruction of the second temple in 70 CE. It was only then that things began to change, writes Rabbi Kaplan. He explains. Things began to change, like we said. Looking at the history of the period for a moment, we can see that even after the second temple was destroyed, the Romans still allowed some remnants of Jewry to live in the land of Israel. However, in the wake of the Bar Kokhba revolt, meaning the second Jewish war against the Roman Empire between 132 and 135 CE, things took a drastic turn for the worse. At this time, the Romans became intent on uprooting the last traces of Torah from the Jewish people. The Hadrianic persecutions reached such a crescendo that all teachers of Torah were condemned to death. It was the time of the 10 martyrs, among whom were the final transmitter of the Kabbalah tradition. Great Kabbalists, great sages were put to death by the Romans after the great revolt against the Roman Empire. We call it the Second Jewish War, or the Bar Kokhba revolt in 132 to 135. As a result of these persecutions, the oral tradition from Sinai, in particular the Kabbalah tradition, was in danger of being forgotten. At this time, Rabbi Akiva, one of the greatest Jewish sages, who lived between 50 CE and 135 CE, he died. Actually, he was one of the 10 martyrs. Rabbi Akiva, he received this tradition. He was considered the greatest sage of his generation, a master of the revealed Torah as well as the concealed one. Rabbi Akiva knew all the secrets, the revealed Torah, the hidden Torah. He knew everything, all the Torah. Rabbi Akiva possessed the Merkabah tradition, the tradition of the chariot of fire. The Merkabah is also known as the chariot of fire. It's a deeper, very deep secrets. They are connected with the throne of Hashem. Many secrets here. Many sources attribute to Rabbi Akiva the authorship of the Sefer Yetzirah, the Book of Formation, one of the oldest and most obscure Kabbalistic texts. So Sefer Yetzirah is a very important book on Kabbalah. Just as the great bulk of the Talmud bears Rabbi Akiva's stamp, so does the Sefer Yetzirah. It was Rabbi Akiva who transmitted these teachings in a well-defined form. So we have that in the first, by the 2nd century, one of the masters of the Kabbalah was Rabbi Akiva. At this time, Rabbi Nehunia ben Akana and his disciple, the high priest Rabbi Ishmael ben Elisha, put into writing the Sefer Bahir, the book of illumination, another important book on Kabbalah, and the Pirkei Chalot Rabati, the greater book of the divine chambers. These two sages redacted the traditions they had recorded in order to preserve them from oblivion during the violent times in which they lived. Commenting on the Mishnah quoted above, Rashi, Rabbi Shlomo Yitzchaki, one of the greatest Jewish commentators of the Torah, to the Talmud, who lived in 1040, died in 1105, he lived in France, asserts that one of the main texts of the study of the Maaseh Merkabah was the Pirkei Chalot Rabadi. This text contains actual meditative exercises, disciplines, and directions for entering the prophetic state. Now let me stop for a moment. We have mentioned different books here: Sefer Yetzirah, Sefer Bahir, and the Echalot. Echalot Rabati, Echalot Sudati. They are different Echalot. They are not all the same. They're different ones. So Sefer Yetzirah, the book of formation, is a sefer. It's a book that deals with many secrets. Many people say that by learning Sefer Yetzirah, you'll be able to learn how to create a golem. Rabbi Kaplan also explains what is a golem. Some people think it's a physical anthropoid, some kind of I don't know how to call it, some type of monster, some type of creation. And others say no, a golem has to do with some kind of partzuf, some kind of mental image. There are different ideas of what a golem is. The Sefer Yetzirah also explains the different secrets of the creation. It speaks about the cosmology, the planets, speak about angels. Sefer Yetzirah speaks about the Sefirot, explains you all of the Sefirot, explains you about the alphabet, the Hebrew letters, the letters that were used to create the world, and many other secrets, and many different meditative techniques that the person can use to achieve the prophetic state. This is Rabbi Kaplan explains this in his commentary to Sefer Yetzirah. Now you have a second book that is a very important one. Again, Sefer Yetzirah, there's a tradition that says it's a tribute to Abraham Avinu, but there's other tradition that says no, the author of Sefer Yetzirah is actually Rabbi Akiva. It seems that Rabbi Kaplan holds that Sefer Yetzirah is Rabbi Akiva's. Rabbi Akiva and his school were the ones who put, who passed the Sefer known as Sefer Yetzirah. Then you have another main book that is known as Sefer Bahir, the Book of Illumination. Sefer Bahir is a text that it's not that it's small Sefer. Rabbi Kaplan also wrote a commentary on it. Basically, Sefer Bahir, what it does is like it's an explanation also about, it speaks about planets, speaks about constellations, speaks about angels, speaks about reincarnation. For the first time, you have a text in the Jewish world that speaks about Gilgulim, Gilgul Neshamot, the reincarnation, the rotation of the souls. The Sefer Bahir details many things regarding the Olamot and how the Almighty runs the world. Now you have other type of literature known as Pirkei Chalot Rabati, the greater book of the divine chambers. There is something else called Echalot Sudarti. There are different books of Echalot or palaces, chambers. Basically, a lot of these ones deal with the ascension to heaven of Rabbi Ishmael, was a disciple of Rabbi Nehunya ben Akana, one of the greatest sages in those days. In what Rabbi Ishmael saw in Shamayim, and also describes many methods of meditation that by using names, Shemot, and repeating a certain amount of time, you'll be able to enter into a prophetic state, and you'll be able to go into what we call the Merkabah, and you'll be able to go up to the supernal worlds. There are many secrets here. Now, there is a book who came later that, or let's better say, the book, as we know, came from that period, but it was revealed over a thousand years later. I'm making reference to the book of the Zohar, the book of splendor, one of the main pillars of the Kabbalah, was taught by Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai around 135 CE. Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai was a student of Rabbi Akiva. Rabbi Shimon also lived during these difficult times when the Romans were actually killing all the great teachers, the sole transmitter of the revealed and concealed traditions. During the 13 years that Rabbi Shimon spent hiding in a cave with his disciples, he taught that he had received from his teachers. During this time as well, he received divine inspiration, Ruach HaKodesh, and merited the revelation of Elijah the prophet. There was a tradition that if the oral Torah was endangered to the point of being forgotten, it was permitted to put it into writing. Therefore, all the masters, Rabbi Akiva, Rabbi Nehunya, Rabbi Ishmael, Rabbi Shimon, set a precedent. They began committing to writing different parts of the oral tradition, including the Kabbalah. However, not all of these books didn't reach a final state or final stage in during the lifetime of the teachers, but later on the disciples keep working on it. They put it together, they edited the material until eventually you have the books that we just call like Sefer Yetzirah, Sefer Bahir, Zohar, and other ones. This is the opinion of Rabbi Kaplan and other Chamim. This is why he writes here. This it says, despite this, however, all of these texts were not given final form for several generations after these teachers. This would be the task of their disciples, and this is why there's something called Megillat Setarim or Nestarim, like hidden scrolls that were passed down. Students were taking notes, and eventually these notes were put in together, and you have these books that we just mentioned. He will explain later on that the Sefer Zohar remained hidden and it appeared in Spain and was revealed by the great rabbi, a great Kabbalist, Rabbi Moshe de Leon, in the 13th century in Spain. No one knew anything about the Zohar until the time the Zohar was revealed in Spain, in the 13th century. It was hidden. There's many stories how the book was hidden, how Rabbi Moshe de Leon acquired the manuscript, and how he was able to put it, and just make it public to the wider audience of the Jewish world. All of these major texts, says Rabbi Kaplan, the Sefer Yetzirah, the Bahir, the Chador Rabbati, and the Zohar, and the various parts of the revealed Torah, contain the basic teachings which had been passed down through the prophets and sages from Moses, from Moshe Rabbeinu. So we see that these books actually were written down because there was a great need. These were days of great danger, that this tradition was about to get lost because many of the Chamim were put to death by the Roman Empire. A lot of persecution, a lot of prohibitions, a lot of persecutions against the sages of the Torah. There was a need to put this book into writing. The time had come to commit these teachings to writing, he says. Interestingly enough, all of these works were obscure to the point of begging the question, what was gain? What had been written down remained, as the Torah had just been in its time a closed book. The keys were to remain oral. Just enough had been written down to ensure that only someone familiar with the tradition would understand. This whole corpus of writings, ranging from the practical understanding of the commandments to the most sublime experience of prophecy, remained a closed book. Yet the Kabbalah tradition was saved. And from this we know that a person cannot learn Kabbalah by just reading a book. You need to have a rabbi. If not, you cannot, because the way the text, the material came out, it was put out, it means that the key to understand the material always remain oral. And so it is until our very days. You always need a rabbi, so I have a rabbi, and everyone has a rabbi, that you receive the Kabbalah from him, and he from his rabbi, and from his rabbi, and so on and so forth, back generations, back to the original source. That's a change of transmission. That's why the source is trustworthy and accurate. And at the same time, you have the many teachings, or the keys to understand the material is always oral. And that's the way to preserve and to protect the Kabbalah, in case it falls into the hands of people who are not worthy. We mentioned that one of the main pillars of the Kabbalah was the Zohar. From the school of Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai, it was on the teachings of the Zohar that the two greatest Kabbalists of modern times built their entire systems. These Kabbalists are Rabbi Moshe Cordovero, who died in 1570, known as the Ramak, Allah Shalom, and Rabbi Isaac Luria, born in 1534 in Jerusalem, and died in 1572 in Tzfat, in Israel, universally referred as the Aryeh, as an acronym for the name Elohi Rabbi Ishaq, the godly Rabbi Ishaq. Now, he says, the Zohar is opaque, says Rabbi Kaplan. It's like, it's an obscure language. Very often, the Aryeh, Rabbi Isaac Luria, Allah Shalom, used to take a passage from the Zohar and meditate on it, perhaps repeating it over and over like a mantra, until the inner meaning was revealed to him. The main relationship between the writings of the Aryeh, Kitbei Aryeh, and the Zohar is that without the Aryeh's teachings, the Zohar does not make any sense at all. It says you could study the Zohar, which is a very poetic text, but you cannot detect any system, any structure. Once you know the Kitbeari, the entire Zohar becomes an open book. So here, for example, you could study the qualities of metals and see that silver is white, gold is yellow, copper is red. Certain things are harder and others softer. Yet you will not understand the reasons for any of these things until you know atomic theory and solid-state physics. Once you have learned these disciplines and you know exactly how light is reflected from certain atoms of copper, you understand why copper is red. It all makes sense and becomes part of a system. The Aryeh's teaching could be called the atomic theory of the Zohar. Everything begins to make sense. One can go deeper and deeper as far as the human mind can delve, and it will always yield new treasures. So here we have an understanding that if a person wants to understand the main text of the Kabbalah, which is the Zohar HaKadosh, the person needs also to study the materials that the other Chamim, the other Mekubalim, they wrote and they explained this text. So the person will have an understanding of what the Zohar really means, what is the meaning of the deeper ideas behind the material. So he says, the main work of the Kitbeari is the Etz Chaim, the tree of life. This work expounds the theoretical foundation of the Kabbalah. For one who has mastered the contents of this work, the rest is essentially revealed. So a person who wants to study the writings of the Aryeh, the number one book is the Etz Chaim. And the main text for learning all the Kabbalah is the Etz Chaim. For example, the Mekubalim from the Yeshiva Betel, they have two main books, Etz Chaim, Shara Kavanot, and they learn only all the books of the Arizal according to understanding of the Rasha, Rabbi Shalom Sharabi, Alav Shalom. So Etz Chaim is text number one. With Etz Chaim, you can crack the code of any book, any text on the Kabbalah. It explains you everything. Don't think it's easy, and I know by experience, learning with my rabbi, it breaks my brain into pieces, and eventually you come to understand a little bit more. It says, for one who has mastered the contents of this work, the rest is essentially revealed. Then the Pri Etz Chaim, the fruit of the tree of life, shows you how to apply the various teachings of the Etz Chaim to all kinds of daily situations. It says, meditations when you put on tzitzit or tefillin, when you pray or when you eat matzah. It also shows you how to develop meditative techniques based on the Aryeh's teachings. Then come the works known as Shemone Sharim, the 8 gates. The first gate is Shar Hakdamot, the gate of introductions. These are introductions that Rabbi Haim Alav Shalom is making to the material. It covers the same theoretical ground as the Etz Chaim. The second is Sha'arei Ma'amarei Rashbi, the gate of Zoharic teachings, basically are the teachings of Rabbi Shimon. The third is Sha'ar Ma'arei Chazal, the gate of Talmudic teachings. The fourth is Sha'ar Pesukim, the gate of biblical verses, meaning commentary on the Torah. The fifth is Sha'ar Mitzvot, the gate of the commandments, explanation of the meaning, the deeper ideas behind the doing the commandments. The sixth is Sha'ar Kavanot, the gate of meditations, intention, The seventh is Sha'ar Ruach HaKodesh, the gate of divine inspiration, which is a general recapitulation and describe how to use the Aryeh system as a meditative discipline. In many ways, the Sha'ar Ruach HaKodesh is the key to the entire Kitbei Aryeh, because all the previous gates deal with theory, while the Sha'ar Ruach HaKodesh teaches how to put this into practice. The eighth gate is Sha'ar HaGilgulim, the gate of reincarnations. An important point which is often lost is that Kabbalah cannot stand by itself without the entire corpus of the revealed Torah. It is an integral part of the Torah. That's why we explain Kabbalah is the fourth level of understanding of the Torah. He says there is not a single Kabbalistic work which does not contain quotations from the Bible, from the Torah, from the Talmud, and the Midrash, and require a profound knowledge of all of these. Bible, Talmud, Midrash, and Kabbalah all work together. Meaning, if a person really wants to understand Kabbalah in a deeper sense, the person must study all of the levels of the Torah. The simple level, the Rash, the the remez, the sod, everything. You have to know Talmud, you have to know Midrash, you have to know Halacha, you have to know all of the books, because all of this, the Mekubalim, they're all rabbis, so they were really experts in all of these science. It doesn't mean that you have to be an expert in every science to be able to go to the next. That's impossible, because a person is always growing. So no one knows everything in all the sciences. So what is good, and this is what the Aryeh explained, is the person must study all of them, and you strengthen the area in which you are more inclined because of the root of your neshama. So the person must study all of them, yes, but the person whose soul is more inclined towards the mystical, you have to nurture, you have to, spend more time in the mystical area, because that's the root, that's the essence of your neshama. A person who is more inclined toward, I don't know, the simple peshat, it goes in the peshat. Someone who is more with the midrash or with the Talmud, he goes deeper in the area, because that will give the person nachas, will give him, it gives the person a lot of satisfaction, it gives the person a lot of connection, because that's the essence of his soul. So the person spends more time in the area that the person, because of the root of his soul. At the same time, he must study all of them. So without this, the person won't be able to really go far in learning Kabbalah, because Kabbalah stands on all of this: Torah, Talmud, Midrash, Halacha, all of this. There are 3 types of Kabbalah. Again, let me say something. When the book says that there are 3 types of Kabbalah, this is the opinion of Rabbi Kaplan. Not everybody holds that like this. Anyways, I will just read it. This is his opinion. There are 3 types of Kabbalah: theoretical Kabbalah, a type of Kabbalah that has to do with meditation, and practical Kabbalah. There's other opinion who says no, there are only two types of Kabbalah, which is theory and practice. And there's someone else who will tell you no, everything is practical. All Kabbalah is practical. You have an utility. So fine, this is all just definitions. It's all good. It's all to understand the text, the materials. So he says, the theoretical Kabbalah essentially gives us a description of the spiritual realm. The Kabbalah of meditation tells you how to get into this inner space. Very often the theoretical Kabbalah is an important guide once you are in there. Otherwise, it is like taking off in a plane. You need maps and charts to make sure you will be able to land. The theoretical Kabbalah gives you these landmarks. In other words, which world you are in, whether on the side of good or evil. There are very few books published on the Kabbalah that has to do with meditation. Very few books, he says, although there are many manuscripts. The paradigm of these is Sha'arei Kedusha, the gates of holiness, written by Rabbi Haim Vital. This is one of the few published books which tells you how to meditate Kabbalistically. Until recently, only the first 3 sections were published. The 4th section consists of a collection from manuscripts of all the different methods of meditation. Now, let me explain something. By the time this Rabbi Kaplan gave over this material, this was the reality. But this is not the case today. Today, you can come here to Israel, you can go to any bookstore, you can go online, you can go to Jewish bookstores, and you can buy all of the books of the Aryeh have been published. Even more and more today, a lot of books on practical Kabbalah, the magical world of Kabbalah. All of this is being published today. So by the time Rabbi Kaplan, this was not the reality. Even more, a lot of the books that had to deal with meditation coming from Rabbi Abraham Abulafia were not published in those days. But by today, all of the material on meditation by Rabbi Abraham Abulafia, Rabbi Al-Botini, Rabbi Siach, there are many books that have to do with meditation and practical Kabbalah that have been published already. So by the time of Rabbi Kaplan, it was not. But today, things change. And you have great rabbis and great Kabbalists today here in Israel. For example, one of the rabbis of my rabbi, Rabbi Yohad Turgeman, he is mainly today in Israel publishing and doing a lot of work in translating and putting out a lot of material on practical Kabbalah, Kabbalah Maasid, for example. So you see that things change. It's not like by the time that this book, I guess, was written or composed, this was not the reality. But today is different. Today you have all kind of books. Anyone can buy the books. Anyone can go here to Mea Shearim or to any Jewish bookstore and just buy all kind of books that whatever you need, you will find it. And there's more and more books that have been published, are being published every time. So he says, the third type is practical Kabbalah or magical Kabbalah. Here too, there are almost no book in print. Again, this is not today. Today you have all kind of books, anyone can buy them. He says, except for Raziel Malach, the angel of divine mysteries, which is divided into 3 sections. The first printer dropped the manuscript, however, and printed it in shuffle order. The typesetter found no errors because he was not expert to understand the text. The main work of magic is Shoshan Yesod Olam, the rose foundation of the world, of which one manuscript exists. Again, you can see from these that this was the reality by the time Rabbi Aryeh Kaplan published this book, Inner Space, again, by the time he gave his lectures in the 80s. But today this is not the case. Today is, again, you have many versions, that coming out by experts, by Mekubalim, who are publishing books, like I just mentioned. Shoshan Yesod Olam is also published. So many books on practical Kabbalah Ma'asit. All of this have been published. Kabbalah meditation, you name it. Today we're living in a generation in which we are seeing that the words of the Chamim that they predicted by this time period will come a time in which the wisdom of the Kabbalah will be available to the world, to the masses. No one can stop this today. And this is the will of the Almighty. The Kabbalah has to go out, it must be revealed. And it's a mitzvah for the Jewish nation to learn the Kabbalah. Because it's the reality that even the non-Jews are learning the Kabbalah. So how could it be that the Jews are not learning their own Mezorah, their own tradition? Again, like I said before, Baruch Hashem, there are more and more people who are interested in learning, in growing, in connecting deeper with the Kadosh Baruch Hu. And it must be done in the proper way. You need to have a rabbi, you need to have someone who guide you, someone who explain you, someone who has the keys of the Mezorah, the tradition that he received from his rabbi, and so on and so forth for many generations. This is the only way that you're being guided in the right chain of tradition, because as we learn, not everything is written down. There are things that remain oral, and for a reason. It is to protect the tradition. And only when you have a rabbi who is really acknowledged, mekuval, and he received the knowledge from someone else, he passes it on to you. So it's the case in which a person is able to really acquire the Kabbalah. For example, today we are making this video public. The books of Rabbi Aryeh Kaplan are no secret to anyone. Anyone can buy Rabbi Aryeh Kaplan's books. So that's why one of the reasons I'm making this course, this series of classes, is because I think it's important to bring awareness. And Rabbi Aryeh Kaplan's books are easy to learn, easy to study, and to really, the idea is to inspire others. The idea is to make a person aware that there is a creator, that you have a purpose, you have meaning. You need to make that deep connection with your soul, with your neshama, and connect with the source of everything, HaKadosh Baruch Hu, the Almighty, the creator of the world. Besat Hashem, Siyata Dishmaya, you may continue to share this knowledge with the world with the help of the Almighty. Thank you so much for your attention. You can leave your comments. In Besat Hashem, we'll see each other in the next class. Shalom and greetings from the holy city of Jerusalem, from Israel. Shalom, everybody. See you next time.